Welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin, your host here today from American International University outside of Massachusetts, or in Massachusetts. Alexander Malinowski from Linkoping originally, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Scandlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products for the U.S. market. You can find us at scandlux.com.
Good to be here.
So I have several people that have hit me up and said you should have Alexander on, and I think we were connecting back in August, and now it's around Thanksgiving. So we finally connect. It's good.
Yeah.
It's I have to say that it's getting a little tricky because I reached out to a lot of people and talked to different people, and I got a lot of bait in the water, so to speak, and it's easy to lose someone that you've connected with. So I kind of lost you there for a second, but all my fault. So so I wanted to have you on, kind of talk a little bit about, later on we'll talk about college hockey, and you've got several Swedes on the same team there, which is kind of unique. Thought we may talk a little bit about future stars, Mike McCarthy, and a little bit on how you ended up in the U.S. juniors and then now in college playing NCAA D1. So, but let's start like we normally do. We go back to the roots. It says Elite Prospect says Linköping's your home, right?
Yep, that's correct. Born and raised in Linkoping.
And then you ended up staying there, local product, stay there for hockey gymnasium?
Yep, that's correct. I was there my whole 3 years of the hockey gymnasium. So, I think I had a total of, 13 years in the club or something like that. So
Yeah, we'll talk about club in my heart later on, but I got a feeling that it may be close by there. Linköping, let's talk about that for a second, because I think Linköping, very, very strong hockey gymnasium, with kind of been producing a lot of their own products for a long time that doesn't travel too far. They recruit from the local area. A friend of mine just sent me some stats about Linköping. His son is going there, and seems like that they have a really good model there to foster up and then have the ability to go up through their juniors and so on. What is that kind of the same feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as you said, Linköping is considered to be one of the best hockey gymnasiums in Sweden, and I was very fortunate to be able to get a spot there. And I mean, I agree. Linköping has a history of kind of raising their own players and trying to get their own players into their lineup. Obviously, having been there so long, I still follow the team, and this year, for example, they have a pretty good number of juniors, for example, and that's kind of how Linköping does it, and was one of the reasons why I wanted to stay and try and get a shot. And
was it always a guarantee that you were going to end up there? I know you played TV puck tournament for Östergötland, and then you got the recruitment. Was it always, hey, this is where I want to go?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, since I've been a kid, I've dreamt about going, all the way up into the pro team in Linköping, and I actually talked to the coaches and stuff there kind of a while before the selection, and they were saying how I didn't really need to worry about it because they were gonna hold me a spot. So I never really thought about going anywhere else going into hockey gymnasium, to be honest.
Yeah. So for the U.S. Canadian listeners or people outside of Sweden, where is Linköping? I mean, how would you describe where Linköping is?
Well, we're kind of lucky when I get that question because we're relatively close to Stockholm. So I always say that we're 1.5 hours south of Stockholm, and then people get a pretty good idea of where
Yeah.
Linköping is.
I grew up in Leksand, and I think that when I think of Linköping, I kind of think of almost like Örebro. It's center of Sweden, even though geographically it's not center of Sweden. It is pretty central and not a huge city, but good sized city with an elite hockey team. Is hockey always been kind of the big sport there? Excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, hockey. I don't think it's because of my bias, because I'm a hockey fan, but growing up, I remember as soon as there was a hockey game at home, it felt like the whole city was talking about it leading up to that week and leading up to that game. So yeah, hockey's definitely been Linköping sports for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, but not easy. So you go there. What would you study in gymnasium?
So I studied nature science, basically, programmet, as it's called.
Okay.
And a lot of biology, chemistry, and physics, even though that maybe wasn't my favorite subjects in school, but I wanted to take it because I know it's a great education.
Yeah. And was that kind of so Linköping also pretty strong academically, but wasn't it always you could have taken an easier route than going the hardest. I mean, that's really the hardest program that you can take in gymnasium, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one would argue.
I mean, for me, I've always kind of been a little bit of a study head. Like I've always had it pretty good in school, and my parents told me early when I started playing hockey that even though I want to be a hockey player, I can't just give up on school, and that's kind of something that stuck with me. So I academically, I just feel like there's always going to be an after hockey, even if that's in 1 year or 10 years or 15 years. And I want to be able to have an education that can help me find a path outside of hockey too. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. But then so 3 years in Linköping, and then you finished gymnasium, but then you end up your last year of juniors, you end up transferring to Malmo. Power program. I mean, Linköping, one of the top programs, but Malmo at the time, I mean, if you look at the roster, I think they had 3 or 4 draft picks on that roster. Was that the COVID year?
Yeah.
I think I was looking. Was that 2021?
Yeah, that's correct. That was the COVID year. Yeah.
What made you go there? I mean, I think here's an interesting kind of little side track to talk about. But just because you go there and you had a lot of points, it's hard to make the SHL team in Linköping, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that was kind of my logic when I transferred to Malmo, because I just didn't feel like I was going to get the opportunity in Linköping. Even though I was fighting for my spot, I just didn't end up getting the possibilities or opportunity to kind of try and fight for a spot in Linköping, and that's where I decided to go to Malmo, because I felt like maybe I had a better chance if you get a few fresh pair of eyes to look at you as a hockey player. And that's kind of why I decided to go there.
Yeah, and then you get a couple of games with SHL team. Of course, I think Malmo at the time in the SHL team wasn't necessarily. They've been struggling the last few years, but that provides opportunities for you as the young guy, right?
Yeah, and that was also what I had in my mind too. That I know that they've had some struggles in the past, and you kind of look at rosters and see like how many juniors are already in the team and kind of stuff like that. And with those valued, then that's kind of how I decided for Malmo. And then, I mean, obviously, it's not like when you want to transfer, you can choose whatever team you want. It's kind of who's interested in you and vice versa. So but I felt like Malmo was a great fit.
Talk about that decision making. Did you have an advisor that you kind of worked with, or how did that work?
Yeah. At the time, I had a advisor that was helping me, kind of reaching out to clubs, kind of see who would be interested, and you always talk about kind of how they see me as a player, and kind of that thing. So my advisor did some calls, and he asked if I wanted to go play in Malmo, and then I had good talk with the coaches there, and I had a visit at their facilities too, and then I decided to go on that opportunity.
Yeah. So, and talk a little bit about, I know offline we talk about, I'm moving around a little bit, trying to turn on some lights here so I don't look like I'm in a hole, but sorry about that. So talk about future stars, because I know we've had Gustav Blom was on here, William Larsson, Kevin Marks Norén, Kim Hilmersson. A lot of people's gone through Future Stars showcase, and you're another one of those guys, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think my first time going to Future Stars probably 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, and I got recommended from a friend who lives up in Stockholm that he wanted me to come with him to this camp that he's gone to a couple years, and that's kind of where I met Mike for the first time, Mike McCarthy, who runs the camp, and he invited me to come back next year, and then I've just gone every year.
Is that what you got? Is that where you got the interest in going over here to the US?
Yeah, I remember my first year that was when I was going to Malmo. It was the first time that I went to the camp, and I remember Mike talking to me about if things doesn't work out in Sweden, and you don't get that SHL spot you want, that there's this path you can take in North America. And at the time I had no idea what that meant, and then kind of after that is when that interest grew, and I started thinking more about it.
Yeah. What was your conversation with your parents about that? Because I'm sure that they were behind the scenes and guiding you, and this is your decision, but
so when after that Malmo season, it got shut down because of COVID. So I didn't really have that many options in Sweden, and I started thinking, what else can I do? And that's when my parents reminded me about this North American route that we've been talking about before, and I wasn't sure at the time, because moving to another country across the Atlantic, it's pretty big deal. Yeah. So but I asked my advisor if he could try and find any teams that would be interested, and Fairbanks came up on the table, and
what was the first impression when you're like, you got all of North America, and Fairbanks comes up?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, because my advisor calls me. I remember it was on a Friday, and he's like, "Yeah, we found a team that's interested, Fairbanks." And I didn't recognize the name Fairbanks. I was like, "Oh, where's that?" He's like, "Oh, it's up in Alaska." And I was like, "Oh no." And I was like, "Is that the only team?" And he's like, "For now, yeah." So that would mean you would have to move to Alaska and stuff. And then he said, they're giving you over the weekend to take the decision. So they only gave me 2 days to take. It's kind of a big decision to take.
Yeah.
But I at first, my first reaction was, I'm not going to take it. It's too far. I don't want to live in Alaska. And then I talked to my parents, and they said, "Alex, you're not going to get an opportunity like this ever again. You don't know where this route can take you, and the worst thing that can happen is that you go home again and try to play here." So I decided to take that chance.
So do you was that because of Future Stars that you got that connection, or was that directly through your advisor that had kind of?
Well, so my advisor took the initial contact with them, right? And then they knew I knew Mike, and Mike knows some of the guys at Fairbanks too. So they talk with Mike, and me and Mike talk with each other too. So Mike was definitely a big help there at Future Stars for me to sign, kind of seal that deal.
Yeah. So, and what way so for those who don't know, Fairbanks plays in the North American Hockey League Tier 2, and has a solid program. I mean, it's up and down depending on each year, but certainly you did really well when you went there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get tendered by them, or how did it work for you coming in? When they said, we want you, there's not necessarily a guarantee that you were going to be on the starting, lineup.
Yeah. So because of the previous season, got cut in half or not half, but cut it short because of COVID. The NAHL introduced a supplemental draft.
Okay.
So teams were able to kind of like basically get 8 extra draft picks that year, and that's the draft I got selected in by Fairbanks, because that was the way. Like for them, that saves tender spots, and they could get me into the team.
So at what point did you fly out? So now in your mind, you're going to Fairbanks.
Mm-hmm.
And what time of the year was this? So this was 21-22 season, right?
Yeah. So this was probably in May or June of 2021.
Okay.
And that would mean that I would have to fly. So it's kind of funny, because back then there was travel restrictions with COVID, and so I actually had to leave. Like, I believe it was 1st of August, even though I only had to report to Fairbanks like August 29th or something like that. And it's because I had to go to a non-European country and quarantine for 15 days before I could even fly into the US.
And where did you go?
So I ended up in Mexico City.
So funny story. I don't know if you listened to the episode with Malte Hasselgren.
Mm-hmm.
So Malte played in Falun, and then he played in Huddinge, I think. Ended up with Lone Star Brahmas, and he went to Turkey.
Yeah.
And then he had to go there the second year. And I asked him, I said, well, why Turkey? Why did you go to Turkey the second? You had to leave after the first year or something. I can't remember. And he just went back to the same place. And I said, he was outside of Dallas, and he could have just went to Mexico, and he just flew to Turkey because that's kind of where it was a funny story. Such a cool kid. And all of you guys that kind of went through that same time period had to jump through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was a lot of like kind of tricks you had to have up your sleeve when it came to that. Because so basically, because of all the COVID stuff, it was impossible to get an embassy time for a visa.
Yep.
To get to the US. So basically, I was there on like a 90-day visa thing or something like that.
Yep.
And that meant that I had to leave, halfway through the season to kind of because I couldn't be in the country. And so I managed to get embassy time in Poland in December or something. So I had to leave early to go to Poland to get my visa. And I was in Poland for I think 4 or 5 days, because you had to wait for the visa and stuff. And then, but it was kind of it kind of worked out pretty well for me, because after I got my visa, I flew straight home to Sweden for Christmas. So I kind of went Poland, Sweden, and then back to the US. And that's kind of So I kind of had to leave the country and come back and stuff, and kind of try and time it with Christmas, and it was, but it worked out.
So to go back to the time in Mexico, so for 2 weeks, were you there by yourself, or did you have other people that went with you?
So we were, I think, 4 or 5 guys. We were all going to the NAHL, because we all had the same advisor at the time, and he knew he had a colleague or a friend in Mexico So we all stayed in Antonio, it was his name, and he let us stay in his house for those 15 days.
That must have been a eventful 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, a lot happened. Like obviously we were in like a gated community, but we still try to go and work out and stuff and at the gym. And like I remember there were protests in the street and like so we couldn't even drive to the gym. So we had to walk like I think it was like 8 kilometers just to get to the gym and then walk back too because we couldn't drive. And then the water stopped working for like a full day or two because there was, it was just a lot of stuff going on. But it was sunny and good weather, so
Yeah, yeah. And then you go from Mexico up to Fairbanks. So, what was the first impression of Fairbanks, Alaska?
Well,
It's a coastal city, right?
Fairbanks it's kind of more central, but
Okay.
it's if you go closer to like Anchorage and stuff, that's where you gotta get to the coast.
That's right. Anchorage is the coastal. That's right.
Yeah.
I've never been up to full disclosure. Never been to Alaska. It's all new to me. So
Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean it was when I got there, it was in August or early September, and so the weather was still kind of nice. So my first impression was like, oh, this is not, as bad as I thought. Obviously, it was very remote. Like you can tell there was not a lot of people who were living there. But I got really lucky because I got, an amazing billet family that took care of me there. And yeah, so I had a good first impression. But then, when the winter comes, it's very dark and cold. But hockey kind of compensated for that. So yeah, honestly, it wasn't bad at all.
yeah. But but the positive thing is that you went from a completely unknown COVID year, uncertainty, to yes, lots of uncertainty, but once you're there, you end up in a great league in the North American Hockey League, and you're killing it. 58 games, 75 points, 33 goals, and 42 assists. Decent numbers, right? You were tearing it up, is really what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good season for sure.
Yeah, but you've always been. I mean, if I look back, you've always been, a sniper and a scorer. I mean, so for those who don't know, you are, you're a winger, and you're not 6'3", 220. So you're there to score goals. So, but how was it it's the game is so different. So how is J20 National versus North American Hockey League?
As you said, it's very different for sure. I would say like the biggest difference is in the NAHL that it's the pace of the game is just so much higher than in J20 because it's a lot of it has to do with the size of the rink for sure because the rinks that we played on is smaller in the US and so much more is happening at the same time in J20 you can tell the guys get very comfortable holding the puck and very smooth skaters, and it's kind of compared to the NAHL where it's kind of it's very gritty and a lot of physical game, and it's because you don't have as much time with the puck.
So when you went there in August, did you bypass the main camp then? So you didn't have to go to main camp, but you went to training camp?
So yeah, I didn't. The coach told me I didn't need to go to main camp. He wanted me to come straight to training camp, and then yeah, after training camp is kind of when they gave the final decision. But I got confirmation pretty early on that I was gonna get a spot and stay. So
yeah, but it wasn't. That wasn't the case for everybody. I mean, how was it to be in that locker room where you go from Sweden, where the team is the team from the beginning, and that's where it's pretty much going to be, except for one or two guys that may move in and out, but not necessarily the case, because I'm sure in training camp, what you have, 30 players or so?
yeah, I think 30 and 4 goalies or something like that.
Yeah, and then they cut it back with basically a line.
Yeah.
At the first before started before the start of the season. So, I mean, was it a lot of, from first practice, it was a lot of hard hits and
there was definitely a lot of physical play, and I think we had a few bare knuckle fights, on the ice too.
yeah.
So yeah, people and players, yeah, they were definitely trying to earn their spot on the team.
Yeah. But you had a couple of other Swedes. So we talked about Kevin Marks Norén, who was with 3 different teams that year. Did he start off I can't remember in my conversation with him, did he start off in Fairbanks, or he got traded there, right?
Yeah, so Fairbanks was his last team on that season. So he basically came into us like a month or so before playoffs, I think.
Okay. And then you had another a big guy, 6'4", 205, Love Bergvall. Not familiar with Love, but Borås Rögle product. And he's playing Hockeyettan now, back in Sweden. But was he there the whole time too?
Yeah, so Love and I actually lived together that year.
Oh, awesome.
With the family. So yeah, he came in. We were actually on the same flight up to Fairbanks. So that was kind of cool, to get to know him better already, traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there the whole season. We lived together for a full year, and he's, now a very good friend of mine.
Yeah. So, and talk a little bit about did you guys experience when the USHL makes their cuts and they start trickling down? When does that happen typically?
So I remember we got one or two guys from the USHL pretty early on. I think it was I think the USHL teams had played just over 10 games or a dozen games or something like that, and that's kind of when they either acquire trading or cut guys. And so yeah, they kind of came down to us, a few guys there.
What was that like? I mean, did you know that was going to happen, and did that make you nervous, or was there nervousness among the team? Because when 2 guys are coming in, that means 2 guys are leaving, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It was obviously the guys were talking about it. I was pretty comfortable at the time because I had a good start, and they hadn't really talked to me about any possibilities of me getting traded. So, but I remember there was guys that was nervous, and 2 of them ended up being traded. And so yeah, there was definitely a tension in the team at the time.
Yeah. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that that's a good thing? I mean, I know that it's not a fun thing to go through, but it's certainly, you can't be comfortable at any point.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I have mixed feelings about it. Like, as you said, obviously it creates a feeling in the team that you always have to stay competitive, and you're not comfortable in a spot. But at the same time, it's kind of brutal how a guy can be in a team for a month and start to know the guys and move across the country, and then the next day he could be traveling to the other side of the country and have to leave his friends. Yeah. So it's kind of it's a brutal system, but I mean, I guess it's effective.
Yeah. So at what point, let's talk a little bit about, because you're at AIC now with a bunch of different Swedes. I was traveling back to the U.S. after this summer, and I was on the flight with 3 of them, I think. I don't think you were on it, but this was in middle of August, so this year. But it was pretty evident of who were hockey players on that flight. But when did you start talking to colleges, and at what point did you start getting, hey, I may want to stay and play college hockey?
So I mean, when I first came over, obviously I wanted to try and get a college spot somewhere, but I wasn't 100% sure on it. And then I had a good start with the team in Fairbanks, and colleges started to reach out to me, and kind of that's kind of how they do it. They reach out and give you information and stuff. Doesn't doesn't mean that they want to give you an offer. A lot of the times you don't get an offer, but I started getting a few offers from some schools in October, I think my first one. So it's already, kind of early in the season. And I think AIC contacted me in November, and I committed in December or something like that.
Yeah. And walk us back to the showcase in Blaine, because we've talked with some other guys about with Gabe Westling. He was, he's in BCHL now, and Kevin and Gustav. That weekend of the showcase in Blaine, talk about, were you aware of how big that really is?
Yeah, I mean, when guys were talking about it, they were saying like all the college scouts are gonna be there and stuff, and I think before you kind of get there, you don't really realize how big of a thing it actually is, because they were right. It was literally every single school scout was there. There was even NHL scouts, so it was crazy. And after every game, teams kind of selected players that they wanted to talk to and stuff.
And you had a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty good weekend, but the thing is, most of the teams actually didn't contact me till a few weeks after the showcase, because I was very new in the league, and they hadn't really seen me that much, so they wanted to wait a few weeks before taking contact with me. And mostly I talked to a good amount of teams, and almost all of them said that they saw me at the showcase, and then they wanted to wait a few weeks and then reach out. I think only one school actually talked to me at the showcase. So after that, I was kind of worried, but then, everything turned out pretty good.
For those who don't know, what's it like to have that conversation? What are what's a typical thing now when you've looked back and you've had several of those conversations? Because they're fishing to find out, can this guy count to three? Does he look you in the eye? But the other thing is, what's your plans? Are you planning on going back to Sweden, or are you wanting to go to college, right?
Yeah. So as you said, they ask kind of what my goals are and kind of where I want to end up at, and then so they kind of get a feeling of, is he going to stay in the US or not?
Yeah.
Are we going to spend this time and energy on this guy if he's not even going to stay here? And then they ask a lot about your academics, that you have, good grades from high school, and, kind of if there's been any issues with school or anything like that. And then I think the main thing is they just want to get a better feel of the person and not the player. And kind of, what manners does he have when he speaks? Is he, they look just about what kind of person he is. I think those things are probably the things that they're looking for in those conversations.
Yeah. Did you have any coaching about how to do those interviews ahead of time?
Honestly, not a lot. I think my advisor talked to me a little bit about it and said kind of what they're going to be asking you and stuff. But I felt like I got more comfortable with it with, more teams started to reach out. So, but yeah, I had some good interviews for sure.
Yeah. So, all right. And then, so that as the season goes on, you're established now, you get acclimated to the new style of hockey. Yes, you had a very successful, you were producing there, you're living in a billet family. So you said, when did you start getting contacted by AIC?
Probably in November, so that would be like 2 or 3 months after I got there.
Okay. So at what point did it start getting serious? And walk us through kind of, because I think this is really helpful for other kids that are in Sweden that are wondering, like, what's it like? And I, that's part of what we want to do, is educate and inform, so people can learn and oh, okay, get a little bit of feel for what it's like. But at some point, they've been talking and they're trying to figure out, and did they come and say, we want to make a formal offer to you, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, I think this was in December. and Matt Woodard, the coach I was talking to at the time, he's still coaching me now. He said he wanted they were looking at making me an offer, but they want to see me play in person first. So
Okay.
Woody actually flew down to Chippewa to watch me play them, and so he was only going to watch one game, so there was kind of a lot of pressure on me, but I think I had my best game of the season that game. I think I had 4 or 5 points just like when he was there. So I talked to him after the game. So they kind of want to meet the player before they make an offer. So and then I talked to him after the game, and then the day after they sent my formal offer about the scholarship and stuff.
And before that, your conversations been with the scouting staff, not with the coaching staff.
Yeah. So so how it works is basically normally the assistant coach that's kind of scouting the players at the same time. So Woody was the assistant coach, but then when it got closer to the offer and me thinking about the offer, the head coach actually called me too. And he wanted to he talked about how he sees me as a player, how he really wants me in the team and stuff. So yeah, it kind of gradually goes from the scouting to the coaches and then to the head coach.
Yeah. And then now it's gone from you selling yourself to them, and now it's turned for them to sell themselves on you, and I'm sure that they're pretty good at it.
For sure.
Did you feel special?
Yeah, it was. I like that process a lot. It makes you, you're really important. No, but it was definitely cool to see how they gave me like a virtual tour on my computer of the school, and kind of like, because I was up in Fairbanks, it wasn't really that easy for me to go down visit the school. Yeah. So they were very professional in giving me all the details about the team, the rink, the facilities, the hockey the program and all of that stuff. So it's they're very professional.
So at what point did you start actually, from an academic standpoint, apply academically and send in your college application to AIC, or did you do that already ahead of time?
So yeah, that is the process. I'll tell you that, all of that stuff. And I think I started. I think I committed verbally to the school December, and then a few weeks after that, probably in January or something after New Year's, I actually signed the
letter of intent.
Yeah, yeah, after that it's kind of like they start sending you stuff they have to do to kind of like you have to show proof of this, or you have to show your financial history, or you have to show you have to send in your grades, and then they ask you how many hours you had that class. It was like new things every day, probably for a good 3 or 4 months. And so that was kind of something I did during the season and after the season. And I think I wasn't even done until like July or something like that.
At what point did you apply for because you have to apply for a new visa, right? Because of the student visa that now you're going to be on. I've got one, if they're F for, I don't know,
the
30
F1.
years for me. So,
yeah.
So how did that, of course, it was good that it was a year after COVID, but still everything was log jammed and not flowing smooth.
So my assistant coach actually warned me ahead of time that, I should start looking already for like a embassy time for the visa. I think he told me that in like February, and I don't think I got it. I think my time at the embassy in Copenhagen for the visa was actually in July. So, I tried to get a time in February and I got it in July. So it was still very busy, even though it was a year after COVID.
But you keep on playing, you keep on working out, and then all of a sudden, here comes in the mail in a big brown envelope. Here it is, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I went to the embassy. I had my meeting and everything. Gave them my passport, and so they can put the visa in, and then they just send it home through post, and got it there.
Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about life as a college student athlete, right? A little bit different. You're in your second year now. And like I said before, you got 3, or is it 4 or 5 Swedes on the team?
We're even more. This year, I think we're 8 Swedes.
Oh, I remember being a bunch of them, and which is unique. But and you're in Massachusetts, a little bit different than Alaska. And what's the closest? Talk about the town, city where you're in. How far are you from major cities in Massachusetts?
So I live in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we're like an hour and a half away from Boston. But that trip is very dependent on traffic. It can take you 3 hours. It can take you an hour and a half. So,
are you south of the city?
We're like west. So if you have Boston here, it's kind of like over here. So, and then we're about 3 hours from New York. So we're kind of in, a pretty good spot in Massachusetts when it comes to like the big cities.
So when you went there this fall after being home in Sweden this summer, did you fly into Boston or did you fly? Okay. I didn't know if you flew New York or Boston.
Boston is definitely the best option. There's good flights with good connecting flights, and then it's only like an hour and a half drive to Springfield.
Yeah. So talk about academics a little bit. You were in nature science or in the science field with your gymnasium in Sweden. Did you study at all when you were in Fairbanks? Did you take any classes?
Yeah. So I started taking online classes the second half of the season, and so it was like 4 classes I think I had.
Through AIC or somewhere else?
It was kind of weird because I didn't really have a student visa, so it was hard for me to get access to be able to study these online classes. So it was through like an online university that didn't demand a visa.
Okay. Was that prerequisites or was that classes that was part of the curriculum already?
So those classes, the AIC talked to me and kind of told me what classes would transfer over to AIC. So that's kind of how I chose my classes.
Okay. So have you declared a major already?
Yeah. So I'm in economics and finance.
Okay. Which is not easy either. But how do you compare? We talked to several people about, Swedish university versus college in the US, and it's more like high school in the setup that you take classes, you go to practice. So not too different than hockey gymnasium from a structure standpoint, but the level is of course a little bit different. But how do you so how was it for you coming in your freshman year to go, okay, now you're on campus and now you're having to take classes?
As you said, it's kind of similar to the hockey gymnasium. So I feel like I got into it pretty quick because I've done it before, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Obviously it was a little different because I hadn't been in school for like 2 years or something like that. But it's it's kind of different from Swedish universities, because here it's more like you pick. It's not only the major, like I'm in finance, right? And it's not only like finance classes I need to take. It's there's general education classes, there's arts class you have to take. So it's more like you pick your own classes that goes into the education, but you can take it at different times.
So you really haven't had any finance classes yet, even in the second year, right?
Well, they've started to come in more and more, but it's like I've tried to narrow through the finance classes and then the others at the same time, so I don't have all my major classes at the end of the my college years, and then so I've tried to have it kind of half so far.
Yep. No, and that's smart. That's smart.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not surprised that I think that for Swedes, the reason I asked that question, I think for Swedes that are worried about college and academics, if you've done well in gymnasium, you will do well in U.S. college or university studies. Plus, you also have, I'm assuming you also have access to advisors, academic advisors, and study help and stuff like that as well, right?
Yeah, we do.
So, talk about the hockey now, NCAA D1. I mean, you guys are playing. How would you describe? I know you got different division or different conferences within NCAA D1, but how is AIC? Because I know it wasn't too long ago you went to the playoffs or the national championship playoffs, right? So
yeah,
it's not, you're not playing at a low level.
No, it's as you said, like I'm at ASC, and we're normally one of the top teams when it comes to going far in the playoffs and stuff. I think before last season, AIC's been in the national tournament 4 years in a row. So it's definitely a strong team for sure.
Yeah. And what's it like? I mean, being a student, of course, if you were at UMass, right? Hockey's big in UMass too, but basketball is much bigger, or even football is bigger than hockey. But what's it like being a college sports student athlete there? I mean, you get treated pretty nice.
Yeah, it's we get really good treatment for sure. Like we have everything we could need. And you're kind of not they're not really treating you as a student, more as a professional when it comes to that stuff. So no, we're getting really good treatment for sure.
How would you describe, so since you've been at the hockey gymnasium for the big clubs, Linkoping, Malmo, J20 National, and then you've been at the NAHL, and now you're in college. What are the differences? Not hockey-wise, but how you're treated and finances and,
well, I would say going from J20 National to the NAHL, I would say you definitely get treated better in Sweden in J20 if you're in the big clubs. Yeah. Linkoping and Malmo, we got treated exceptionally well, like the pro team almost, with sticks and with the financing and everything like that. But then when you come to the NAHL, it's kind of different because it obviously you get good treatment, but it's not at that same level as in Sweden. So but then kind of when you switch over to college, that's when you kind of go back to what we had in Sweden with getting really good treatment, the financing, the equipment, the food, everything like that. So
yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to paint a picture for those who are listening or watching on YouTube is it's pretty nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, you have to work and you have to put in the hours and you have to do really well academically. But being a college athlete is probably, you're going to look back and say that was the best time of my life, is being in college.
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, it's, as you said, you get treated well. They help you with everything you need, and we still have time to have some fun too. Yeah. And it's definitely going to be memories for life for sure.
Well, especially with 8 Swedes there, that's kind of weird. It's a little community for sure. So
yeah, I mean,
your English is you're not lacking on the English, so that's really, really good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we kind of have a bad habit of just talking Swedish to each other all the time because then it can affect our English. But the Americans and the Canadians, they always give us stick for talking Swedish. So we're trying to talk as much English as we can too.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Thanks for coming on. I hope that this is educational for people who are listening, and we can help people kind of paint a picture of what it's like and how to get there. It's not easy to get to NCAA D1. It's not easy to get to North American Hockey League and stay in there. You've done exceptionally well. You've been you were the top scorer in the team in the NAHL, and one of the top scorers in on the AIC team as well. Two more things. So you're 22 now, right?
Yeah.
What would you met yourself 17. So what would you tell yourself advice if you sat there on the bench or in the locker room and said, let me give you a piece of advice that I wish I had, that I didn't know then that I know now, gone through this journey? What would you tell yourself?
Well, I would tell myself that, if you get an opportunity, take it, and don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone, because, going out of my comfort zone is what's given me this opportunity and it's an opportunity that a lot of people dream of.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, we've got a partnership with Target Aid, targetaid.com, and we have a presence there on Target Aid. Target Aid's a fundraising platform. So we're trying to help primarily Swedish clubs to get attention. And we have this project called the Team of My Dreams, or Klubben i mitt hjärta. So every guest is going to have a little spot under the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast section there. What team is the team in your heart?
Well, I would say it has to be my hometown team, Linkoping, still. Even though, it didn't work out for me as I would have wanted it, it's still, the team in my heart for sure.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure that gets mentioned, and hopefully we can create a story for content that they can share, and for people to kind of go in, follow the team. I think you've got a really interesting journey. Another prop to Mike McCarthy with Future Stars Academy, or Future Stars Showcase there. I think that this will be released probably first week of January. We've got a few in the hopper here. And if you're looking at, just go to Future Stars Hockey and Google it. You'll find Mike McCarthy and Bjorn Bjurling, who run some awesome camps. And if you're interested in going kind of the North American route, whether it's NCDC or North American Hockey League or USHL, you probably want to have some conversations with Mike. I've had those myself, and just a great guy, and huge props to him and what they're doing, and been really impressed with the product that they've been able to kind of concentrate to kind of funnel in there. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you for sure. If any, younger players are listening to this right now, if you want to get a shot at going to North America, I definitely advise you to try and get in contact with Mike McCarthy at Future Stars Academy and attend the camp and the showcase that they have every year, because they will definitely increase their chances for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and we'll stay in touch, and good luck the rest of the season.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.